Hey friends, I'm sorry for being a little bit late, only got 3 minutes, and I totally expected this to start all the way, so I was actually talking and talking and talking and realizing it wasn't actually live. So, and that's up rare. Okay, so off to a rocky start, but we'll see if we can get it back on track and back to going back to normal. Anyway, I scheduled to go live and then didn't realize I wasn't live, and so anyway, we'll keep going. So today I want to talk to you about compare word problems. And last year I did some Facebook Lives on join word problems and separate word problems. And people have been asking, how do you do compare problems? How do you teach those to students? And I've always meant to do a Facebook Live on compare problems, and it just kind of got put to the back burner and life got in the way. And now that I'm doing Facebook Lives again, it's been one of those that's been on my list to do. So now I'm doing it, and I can email all those people and say, I did it, and you can come and watch it. There are four main word problem types that we deal with students: join, separate, compare, and part whole problems when we're looking at addition, subtraction word problems. And in the Facebook Live, I put some links to a blog post that has some more information on those, so you can take a look at those when you have a chance. But what we're going to do today is take a look at compare word problems. And I want to make a distinction before we get started on it is, and that what we're looking at is comparing word problems. We're not looking at comparing objects so much. And students, you're going to need to do some prep work with your students if you haven't done so already, on how to compare different objects. Which one is larger, which one is smaller, and what's the difference between those. You can use unifix cubes, you can use measurement, you can use different things within the classroom. I know for my students, we would always measure our feet. And students could tell, okay, he has larger feet, he has smaller feet, and then we would take a look, what's the difference between those 2 feet? And so students are going to need a lot of tactile and hands-on activities with comparisons before you get into comparisons with word problems. The word problems just add another level of complexity to it. And if students don't have proficiency with comparing physical things, whether it's unifix cubes or the length of a table or comparing feet or hands or different things, measurement is a great opportunity to dive into it in a tactile, hands-on way. And so you'll need to establish that with your students before you ask them to solve word problems in that way. And I use it with measurement a lot. You can also deal with just groups of objects, and unifix cubes work well with that because they can represent the different groups of them. And let's see, I think that was it. Just making sure that there's a foundation there before you get into solving with word problems. There are 4 main vocabulary words that I teach with word problems with compare. In join and separate problems, you have a different set of vocabulary. With compare problems, you're looking at larger, smaller, more, and less. And more and less can kind of go together because you would only use one per word problem, depending on whether the problem is asking for more or less in it. So there is larger, smaller, more, and less. And at the beginning of the Facebook Live, which I thought was already going, I showed you this model, and it is the model that I use with students in the classroom. I have it in a resource, and I just cut it out at a smaller level and distribute it to the class. And students take a look at identifying which number is larger in the problem, which number is smaller in the problem, and whether or not they're identifying more or less. And so students take a look at identifying those pieces of the problem. In a word problem, one of these pieces will be unknown. And so it could be the larger number is unknown, the smaller number is unknown, the more or the less, and what is being solved is unknown. And so we're going to take a look at each one of those type of problems and take a look at what those and how to solve them. So we'll go through some of them. There are 3 compare word problems. The first one is compare difference unknown. Let's see, I'll move that down there. Compare difference unknown. And so this is the example that we're going to go through here. And in it, you are solving for the difference between the 2 objects in the problem. So in this case, it's objects of balloons, and who has more, who has less, and what's the difference between them. This is actually the easier one to solve because if students can figure out which is larger and which is smaller, they just need to figure out the difference between those 2 numbers. The other problem that we're going to take a look at and solve is called compare, let's see, let me get it up there, compare quotient unknown, and so it's CQU. And in this one, students are taking a look at, it's not the difference between the two, but how many of one of the objects that is there. So they're comparing either the larger or the smaller, but how many of one of them. And then the last one is compare reference unknown, and I tugged it down there to tug the other one down, and there it is. And so this one, did I get them all right? Okay, sorry, switch places down to the bottom, and I moved the top one up, so they're in a different place. But this one takes a look at compare reference unknown, and it's one of the references in the problem, taking a look at which one is unknown in the problem. So we're going to go through actually these, let me scoot over. Woo! We're going to take a look at these 3 word problems I actually have them on an iPad, and I think I can stream it on here. So we're going to try it out, and we're going to take a look at all of those. But before we get into that, I mentioned that there are 4 words that we use when we are comparing and solving comparison problems. One is larger, smaller, and then more or less. I happen to have picked, for some reason, both problems that have more here, but they can easily be changed to less. You just have to change the word in the problem, and it means the same thing. So when I do this with students, I project the problem up on a board, and we actually go through and mark all of them. So let me show you what they would look like if they were all marked up with the right words in there and identifying which one it is. Let's do one at a time. So we'll do this one first. And so down here it says Sam has blank balloons. His sister Colleen has blank balloons. How many more balloons does Colleen, I think it says have, I don't have it on my, there we go. How many more balloons does Colleen have than Sam? And so since we know that Colleen has more balloons, we know that she's going to have the larger amount. And so I always label it and put on there larger. So who has larger and which number is going to be larger? If you've seen any of my material, I always give students, at least as I'm teaching it, give students problems that don't have numbers in them. Because the numbers kind of trip up the word problem. Students take the numbers and say, oh, I'm just going to add them together, and then they do that. Or I'm just going to subtract them, and then they do that. They don't actually read the word problem for meaning. So what I try and have students do is take a look at the word problem and read it for meaning. By removing the numbers, we take a look at the context and the situation of the word problem and read it for meaning. And so you see this one is labeled with larger and smaller, and I've circled more because that is what I am solving for within this problem, and it's a more problem. If you take a look at this one is Charlotte picked blank apples. She picked blank more cherries than apples. How many cherries did Charlotte pick? Again, a pretty simple problem in terms of words in it, but it's taking a look at what is more, what is less, what is larger, and what is smaller, and identifying those within the problem. So Charlotte picked blank apples. We don't know whether that's smaller or larger yet. We have to keep going. She picked blank more cherries. Well, now we know that the cherries are going to be larger, and the cherries are a larger part of the problem. So I circled more and I circled cherries, and that the smaller part is the apples. And it's asking how many cherries did she pick. So that larger is actually what we're solving for within the problem. So how many cherries did she pick? And then the more is going to have a quantity next to it for how many more. Here is the last one that is all marked up, and it says Susan has blank books. She has blank more books than Brody. How many books does Brody have? And again, she has blank books doesn't tell you whether that's the smaller or larger one, so you've got to keep reading. She has blank more books than Brody. Well, Susan has more, that means she has the larger quantity, and Brody has the smaller quantity. And you are solving for, in this case, the smaller quantity. And that's the unknown at this point. And I've circled more so that we can identify how we're solving the problem that's there. Alrighty, so that explains the 3 problems that we're going to go through today. And what I'm going to do is transition over to the iPad and take a look through some of these problems and show you what they look like. And I think this will work, and we'll see how it goes. Alrighty. So this one, we're going to start with this one, which is Sam has blank balloons, and his sister Colleen has blank balloons. How many more balloons does Colleen have than Sam? And so in here, we mark it up. When I'm with students, I tend to mark it up exactly like I would with students. So I take a look at, Sam has blank balloons. I don't know whether that's more or less yet, or the larger or smaller number yet. Colleen has blank balloons. How many more balloons? Well, here's the more. Does Colleen have? Okay, so Colleen has the more, which means she has the larger amount. And Sam is going to have the smaller amount. So Sam down here he's going to be in the smaller amount. Colleen is going to be in the larger amount. And then that more or less is what I am solving for in this problem. So that's what I'm going to solve for. So in this particular problem, let's choose the numbers 56 and let's see, 75. And so I give students, after we identify who has the larger, who has the smaller, sorry, this up here should be smaller. So after we identify who has the larger, who has the smaller, and where those numbers go within our graphic organizer, then we're ready to solve it. And so for this one, we're figuring out the difference between 56 and 75. And so I will often use a number line to solve these and just use an open number line. So 56, the next friendly number is 60, going up to 70, going up to 75. And that is, of course, 4, 10, 5, and we're looking at a total of 19 right there. Let's see, I think I did that right. And so I have students write after, will this move up? Yeah, it lets me move up. I have students write afterwards, and let's see, the problem has, how many more balloons does Colleen have than Sam? Let's see, Colleen has, am I spelling it right? Yeah, no, 2 E's. Has 19 more balloons than Sam. And then I have students write down how they solved the problem. And so they can talk about identifying the larger number, identifying the smaller number, putting into a model that we use within class, and then using a number line or however they solve it. But that's basically how they do that one. Moving on to this one, this is the compare reference unknown. And this one says, Susan has blank books. She has blank more books than Brody. How many books does Brody have? So again, this is going to be more, but it's taking a look at, see if I can use the right colors here. It's taking a look at more, but it's taking a look at who has more. And we know right now she, which is referring to Susan, has more books. So that is our larger number there. And Brody is going to be our smaller number. And you can put small next to either one, but the question says, how many books does Brody have? So we are solving now for that smaller number. So we have a larger number, we know how many more she has, and now we're solving for the smaller number. Now you could really easily, let's see if I have change this out and put less. And it works as the same type of problem. You're just solving it for less instead of more. Either one works. I just happened to print the one that said more instead of less. So that's what we will solve it for today. But it's easily changed out for a different word, and they both go in the same place. So let's take a look at this problem. We'll say Susan has 37 books, and then she has 15 more books than Brody. How many books does Brody have? Inserting it into the model that we're using, 37, 15, and again, you can use a number line. The last time I showed you how to find the difference between the two numbers using a number line, and this time we'll take a look at starting at 37 and then decreasing it by 15. So she has 15 more books, which means Brody's going to have the lesser amount, so we'll just subtract 10 right here, getting down to 27, and subtract that 5, moving down to 22. So Brody has 22 books. And again, I have students write out the answer to the problem as well as how they solve the problem. And it just makes, it does a couple of things. One, it helps solidify the process in their brains and helps them articulate that process. I definitely give them sentence frames to use and vocabulary to use and aids along the way if they need it, depending on the student. But the other thing it does is it helps my higher students just take it to that next level. If I need a little bit extra time to work with some of my students who aren't quite getting the process, I can move over to those students and work with them a little bit while my higher students are expressing their understanding in writing and being able to just take it a little bit deeper. The other thing that I love about these problems is that I can very easily change these numbers. And so let's say this is an avid reader and I want to put in here that she has 350 books and she has 170 more books than Brody. I mean, those are larger numbers for the context of this problem, but the idea is that you can entirely change the numbers in these problems. And so for my higher students who might be working on higher level math, I would put in different numbers. And whether it's 3-digit numbers or you use 2-digit numbers that require regrouping, or you use a 2-digit and a 3-digit number that crosses 100, it's up to you. The idea is that you can differentiate the numbers for your students and be able to help them move to the next level wherever they're at. Alrighty, this last problem, oops, I didn't go that far. Let's see, there we go. This last problem is Charlotte picked blank apples. She picked blank more cherries than apples. How many cherries did Charlotte pick? And this is the compare quantity unknown. And so in this, you are trying to figure out one of the quantities that are there. So Charlotte picked blank apples. We don't know whether that is the larger or the smaller number yet. That is still, we don't know. We have to keep reading. She picked blank more cherries. Now in this problem, it's interesting because Charlotte isn't the larger or smaller number, I guess. I know it's odd for a person, but in the other two problems, we had Susan and what she had, and Susan had more. Or we had Sam and what he had, and he had less, sorry, in the problem. And in this one, this is actually talking about apples and cherries. And so she picked more cherries, and the more part is the cherries in this problem. And so that will be your larger number. And so if I'm doing this with students, I will put cherries down here and label it with students. And so that's the more part of it. The apples then becomes the smaller part, small, and I would label that with student. And then what you are trying to figure out is how many cherries she picked. So you have the quantity for the apples, you have how many more cherries she picked, but you don't know exactly how many cherries she picked. And so one of your quantities is unknown at that point. So the unknown is your larger number, your cherries. It's one of your quantities. So in this problem, let's pretend it's 57. That was a really bad 7. So let's try that again. It's 57, and she picked 25 more cherries than apples. And my handwriting is really bad on iPads, and so I'm doing my best, but you get the idea. So of the number. So it's not a handwriting test, it's a math test. So in the problem, Charlotte picked 57 apples. So here's our apples. And she picked 25 more cherries. So there's that more part, 25 more. And so now we have to find out how many cherries, since that's what we're solving for, how many cherries did she pick? And this becomes a simple addition problem. Oops, dropped the pen. A simple addition problem of 57 and 25. So 57 and 25, I'm just going to combine them this way instead of using a number line. Just gives you another option on how to solve the problem. Becomes 70 plus 10, which now equals 90, 80, 82. There we go, which now equals 82 cherries that she picked. And so different ways to solve those different problems. As I said earlier, these are not these particular problems. There's a bunch of different problems are outlined in a couple of blog posts. And so I have a couple of them on my website. This is one that takes a look at how to teach students to solve word problems. And if I open it up to the reader view, this should give you a little bit more of a, it isn't exactly how it looks on the blog post, but it'll give you an idea of what's there. And so in it, I talk about how to differentiate the word problems using the blank spaces, and that these are sort of the key things that I do when I teach word problems. So it'll go through, you can sign up for a free sample of these word problems, and the compare word problems are part of it as well. So you can just sign up and get a free sample of them. And so there's a bunch of different word problems in here, and it talks about different strategies that I use with students and how I work with them to be successful with solving those word problems. There is also a post here that is about using keywords to solve word problems. And so often we use and make lists of all these different keywords that we find helpful. And often more or less are some of those keywords. But as you can tell from some of these problems, I used more in 2 different problems, and it didn't always mean to add. So you have to take a look, or students have to take a look at the context of the problem. And so this blog post just explains why I shy away from and don't use keywords to solve word problems. There are instances when the keywords work, and there are instances when the keywords don't work. So what I want to do is teach students how to read the problem for context and take a look at the situation or the comprehension or what the numbers are actually doing in the word problem. And that's why I remove the numbers so that we can look at the word problem as, a reading comprehension activity more than a numbers problem. These all correlate with a resource, which is this addition, subtraction, word problems by problem type resource. And I also, I think I put a link in there. If not, I'll put it in there. But you can find it through any of those other posts. And this is a resource that I've developed to help students solve word problems and help teachers differentiate the numbers between the word problems. So there are photographs and examples. Here's a compare problem, another one. Again, this one has more, but it has links to the other posts in it, and it tells you just a little bit about what's in this particular resource. So you can get some more ideas of how students use the problem, different models that students can use to solve it, and some sample writing that you can use with it. So those are different resources that are part of that resource. And there was one more thing I was thinking about showing you, but I darned if I know what it is. Alrighty, well, I'll just go back to this. There we go. And I'll take a look at some of the questions. I think they're mainly just hello questions and hi and thanks for being here and all those type of questions. I had someone ask when are you starting? And so hopefully she got the message that we had started. And that's it. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments below and I'll try and get to them later today or as you leave them. I don't always get notified of stuff with Facebook. It can be finicky. So just feel free to email me from my website, or you can sign up for one of the free samples of the word problems and feel free to email me with those. And I will respond to any questions or comments that you might have with things. So thanks for watching today, and I hope that you have a great evening. Talk to you later. Bye.